By now, most people have heard that last Friday, during a summit he had on Canada-US relations, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was caught on a hot mic saying Donald Trump's threat to annex Canada is, quote unquote, a real thing. That would then make it a national security matter, wouldn't it? It's a threat to our sovereignty. It's a threat to our independence. And yet Trudeau will not recall Parliament. You remember 3 years ago, a bunch of disgruntled truck drivers stole all the best parking spots in downtown Ottawa, set up some bouncy castles and a hot tub or two, sat around for 3 weeks blasting their horns, which must have been incredibly irritating for people who lived in the area. And that was such a crisis that Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act. He suspended freedom of expression. He suspended freedom of assembly, at least for those people who were involved in the Freedom Convoy. And he seized bank accounts of people who dared to donate to the Freedom Convoy. Yet somehow, despite that national crisis, he managed to keep the doors of Parliament open. Now, I think we are under an even greater threat. I don't think the Freedom Convoy was a threat to Canadian sovereignty or democracy, but the Americans could be a threat. At least on paper, this is a bigger threat. And what has Trudeau done with Parliament? He's suspended it. He's put it on holidays. He's put MPs on a hiatus. Because the Liberal Party of Canada needs the time to select his replacement. This is once again one of those examples of the Liberal Party confusing its own party interests with the national interest. What's good for the Liberals must be good for Canada. So he has suspended Parliament for the better part of 3 months so the Liberals can elect a leader. Even though he himself claims that our sovereignty, our democracy, our independence are under threat from Donald Trump. Now, I don't think Trump is going to annex Canada. I don't even know by what mechanism he would want to do that. There's a small city just south of Edmonton that wants to annex part of the county that's next to it, the rural county that's next to it, so it can expand some of its subdivisions. It applies to the province for permission to do that because the province has legal authority over both entities, both the city and the county. Who would give the United States that kind of permission? When they annexed Hawaii, of course, they passed a law in the U.S. Congress saying that Hawaii would now become part of the United States, but it took them 60 years to act on that. And they didn't act on it until the Hawaiians asked them if they could become part of the United States. So who would Donald Trump ask for permission to annex? It's a puzzlement. So the fact that the Prime Minister is losing his mind over this is yet another example of his inability to understand complex issues. You think Trump is unable to understand complex issues, and that's true. He is unable to do that. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is just as unable. So why is Parliament not being recalled? There are no motions. There are no question periods. There are no committees that are seeking expert testimony. Nothing that would normally go on to hold this government account is able to be done because Trudeau suspended Parliament. He prorogued Parliament at a time that he says is a national crisis. This is just another example of how self-centered and arrogant this Liberal government has been and how incompetent it has been. We're now to be governed by the few cabinet ministers who aren't running to replace Trudeau, some bureaucrats, some staff in Trudeau's office, him when he's in the country and he's not flying off to summits in Paris, and by this council he's pulled together that includes a former Liberal Premier of Quebec, a former NDP Premier of Alberta, very few, if any, oil executives, which is surprising because oil is one of the big bargaining chips we have to deal with the Americans, and a bunch of Liberal-friendly business people. That's who's now governing us. Our own MPs, the people we elected to represent us and to make decisions for us, are not able to come together and have normal democratic accountability in Canada. at a time that Trudeau says is a national crisis. This may be, among all the arrogant actions he's ever taken, this may be the most arrogant. Bring Parliament back now so that we can deal with this American threat in the way a democracy should. For Postmedia, I'm Lorne Gunter.